The wind moved through the playground like a soft whisper. Leaves danced and the swings squeaked. At the far end, under a line of tall trees, a young woman sat in a chair with wheels that shined in the afternoon sun. This place was simple green, grass-bright slides, a blue sky, but her eyes held an old sadness. Her name was Charlotte Blake. Some people knew her as the daughter of James Blake, the CEO of Blake Tech. Some people only knew her as the girl in the wheelchair, but today, in her own heart, she felt like something even smaller, a forgotten birthday. There was a cupcake on her lap, vanilla frosting melting a little in the light. No candles, no balloons, no friends. The title of her life, if someone put it on a screen, would read like a quiet cry. CEO's paralyzed daughter sat alone until a single dad said, "My daughter would love to play with you." She looked at the playground where her mother used to push her on the swings when she was little. She could almost hear the laughter again. It hurt to remember. It hurt not to remember. 4 years had passed since the crash that took her mother and took the feeling in her legs. 4 years since her father shut the door of his heart and turned on a new life made of meetings and numbers and flights. She breathed in, trying to steady herself. The sky was a soft blue, and a bird called from a branch. Somewhere a toddler giggled. Charlotte kept her back straight, the way her father liked, as if good posture could hold a broken life together. A small voice cut through her thoughts. "Hi." She turned. A little girl in pink leggings and a yellow sundress stood there, with a sun hat tilted sideways and a teddy bear hanging from her arm. The girl's eyes were wide and brave. She did not stare at the wheelchair. She did not step back. "My name is Luna," she said. "I really want to play." "My daddy said, I can ask." Before Charlotte could answer, a man walked up, tall, wearing old jeans and a faded t-shirt dusted with work powder. He had soft stubble along his jaw and the look of someone who carried too much and complained too little. "I'm so sorry," he said gently. "She saw you sitting alone, and well, she wanted to ask nicely." He placed a calm hand on the girl's shoulder. "We can give you space if you want." Charlotte looked at the cupcake. She looked at the girl. She looked at the man. She felt a small laugh slip out, the first real sound from her in hours. "It's okay," she said. Luna's face lit up like sunrise. "Can we play now? I could use a friend today." Charlotte nodded. The man's shoulders eased. "I'm Daniel." He said it like a promise, not a performance. Luna plopped down on the grass beside the wheelchair and pulled out a little bag of colorful plastic blocks. "We're making a castle," she announced. "A big one, with pancakes." Daniel chuckled. "Pancake towers," he teased. Charlotte smiled, and it felt like a window opening. They built a lopsided castle that leaned into the wind and held anyway. For a while, the world was just a small kingdom under a tree, a quiet woman with a melted cupcake, a gentle father with dusty hands, and a child who believed everything could be turned into a game. The cupcake sat behind them, untouched. For the first time that day, Charlotte did not feel like she was waiting for anyone to remember her. She felt seen. 3 days later, life proved that quiet moments can grow roots. Charlotte sat in her favorite corner of Calf Bellflower with her sketchbook open. She liked the clink of cups, the hiss of milk foam, the window light that spread like honey across the tables. She was drawing a tree by the old playground bench, trying to catch the way shadows leaned on the ground. "That's her, Daddy." A small voice sang across the room. Charlotte looked up. Luna was already halfway to her, rain boots squeaking, smile bright. Daniel followed, a little out of breath, navy hoodie, hands rough from work. "Sorry," he said, cheeks flushed. "She remembered you." "She has a very good memory," Charlotte said. Luna reached the table and held up a napkin. "Are you drawing?" Charlotte turned the sketchbook toward her. "I'm trying." "Whoa," Luna whispered, like she was in a museum. "You're a real artist." Daniel laughed softly. She's been into painters since she saw a show about Monet, but she calls him the puddle painter. Charlotte laughed, the sound tiny, but warm. They stayed only a few minutes. Daniel bought a coffee to go and left with a promise. Next time we bring crayons. When the cafe door closed behind them, Charlotte looked at the empty space and felt something like the echo of a song you want to hear again. A week after that, she met them in the supermarket by accident. Luna stood by a cart holding a loaf of bread like treasure. The princess drawer, she shouted when she saw Charlotte. Daniel shushed and smiled in the same breath. Inside voice, "Can I buy you a cookie for your birthday?" Luna asked, soft and serious. Daniel's hand came down gently on Luna's shoulder. "We have to watch the budget today, honey." Charlotte said, "I'm here for tea and cookies. Maybe we can pick one together." They chose a soft oatmeal raisin cookie. Daniel thanked her too many times. In her car later, Charlotte sat with the cookie on her lap and realized her hands were shaking. She was moved by a child's kindness. She was moved by a father's care. She was moved by a small, quiet piece of life that felt honest on a rainy morning. The park was almost empty. Charlotte came anyway. She liked the smell of wet earth and the music of the rain. Under a gazebo, she saw Daniel spin Luna in a circle. The little yellow boots splashed water, and the girl laughed until she fell into her father's arms. The picture hit Charlotte like a wave. She remembered being little, dancing with her dad in the kitchen before dinner, before the world cracked. She turned her chair and wheeled to a bench under a tree, trying to breathe. Across the field, she saw an old woman struggle with a plastic bag that tore in the rain. Daniel walked over without thinking. He took off his coat, put it over her shoulders, and gave her his umbrella. The old woman patted his hand with tears in her eyes. He smiled, then walked back to Luna, soaked but steady. Charlotte watched and felt hot tears gather in the cool rain. She had not seen simple goodness like that in a long time. She stayed longer than planned. When she left, she carried a new question with her. Maybe this was not an accident. Maybe kindness that feels like a small boat can still cross a wide sea. Tuesdays and Fridays turned into a pattern. Luna called them Charlotte days. They sat under the same tree. Daniel brought coffee. Charlotte brought grapes. Luna bought drawings and jokes and pockets full of tiny rocks. Charlotte learned that Daniel fixed air conditioners, heaters, and anything that hummed or clanked. She learned that he woke up before sunrise to make a lunch for Luna. She learned he kept an extra pair of socks in his truck for cold mornings. She learned he did not look at her chair before he looked at her face. When her water bottle cap was stuck, he opened it and handed it back without a word. When her wheel caught gravel, he freed it and smiled like it was nothing. He never asked about the chair. He never asked about the pain. He never asked why she watched the sky when she got quiet. He just stayed. One week, Luna got a fever. Daniel texted that they would miss the park. Charlotte felt a heavy emptiness. She baked cookies to fill the silence, like her mother used to do on rainy afternoons. Cinnamon warmed her small kitchen. On a soft breath, she sent a message. She'll better, Daniel wrote back, still warm, but she asked if the cookie lady could visit. Without thinking too hard, Charlotte wrote, "I have leftovers. Want to come by?" He answered, "We'd love to." He took off his work boots by the door, without being asked. Luna fell asleep on the couch with her bunny and a crumb on her lip. Charlotte and Daniel washed dishes side by side. When their fingers touched, she froze, waiting for the old fear to rise, but he kept drying the bowl like it was the most normal thing. She whispered, "I'm sorry." He looked puzzled. For what? She shook her head and could not explain. That night, after they left, she opened her sketchbook and drew Daniel with his arms open as Luna ran into them. The lines came easy. She realized this was the first time in years she wanted to draw someone because she wanted to remember how it felt to be near them. One evening after tea, When the world was quiet and the air cool, Charlotte spoke about the crash. She had never told anyone all of it at once. The words came slow, like stepping stones across a river. It was only a mist, she said. I had a migraine. Mom insisted on driving me back. We were on Highway 63. A truck came too fast. We hit the guardrail. I remember her scream. She swallowed, then nothing. She woke 3 days later to a white ceiling and heavy news. Her mother was gone. Her legs were quiet. Her father stood by the window and did not say, "I'm glad you're alive." He never said, "This is not your fault." He just worked more and spoke less. The house got bigger and colder. The chair became the loudest thing in the room. Daniel did not rush to fill the quiet. He did not hunt for perfect words. He placed his hand over hers and let it rest there, warm and steady, like a lighthouse hand on a shaking oar. "You are not the reason she died," he said at last. "And I don't think your father hates you. I think he lost the person he loved and forgot how to love what was left. That happens to people who break." Charlotte blinked and felt a tear slip down her cheek. "How do you know that?" Daniel's eyes softened. "My wife was named Natalie. She was a chef. We used to dance in the kitchen too. She got sick when Luna was a baby. It came fast. After she died, I drank. I slept on the floor. One morning, I found Luna trying to butter toast on the kitchen tiles. She said, 'It's okay, Daddy, I feed you now.' She was 2. That day I put the bottle in the sink and turned back toward the light. She saved me." The kitchen hummed with the small sound of the fridge. The white noise machine in the living room purred. Charlotte looked at Daniel's hand over hers and did not pull away. "I don't know if my dad will ever say the words," she whispered, "but I think I understand him more now." "Maybe he is not angry," Daniel said. "Maybe he is just lost." The room felt like a soft door opening. The first turning point came like a cut of cold air. The next week, as they sat on the picnic blanket, Charlotte saw a shadow move at the edge of the path. She looked up, and the world narrowed. Her father stood there in a gray suit, the kind that made people move out of the way. He looked like a statue from a bank building, hard lines, polished edge. He stared at Daniel first, not at her. His voice was cool and sharp. "I've been hearing things," he said, "about my daughter, about Parks and this." He waved his hand, a gesture that held both the picnic and the man and the messy joy of Luna's crayons. "Are you the one she spends time with?" Daniel stood. "Yes, sir." "You fix air conditioners?" "I do." "You have a child?" "I do." "Then let me be plain," James Blake said. "My daughter is not a charity case. She is the heir to a billion-dollar company. She needs stability, care, a future plan, not." His hand sliced the air again. The heat climbed up Charlotte's neck. Something that had slept inside her stood up. She rolled closer, placed herself between the two men, and found her voice, low and steady. "No," she said to her father, "I will speak." He went silent, surprised. "You act like I am broken glass you must keep in a quiet box," she said. "You act like love is a budget. You have not looked at me since the crash. Not really. You look around me, over me, past me. This man," she tilted her head toward Daniel, "never once looked at my chair before he looked at me. You say I need a life built on safety. I need a life built on being seen." Luna stopped coloring. Even the wind seemed to hush. "You're making a mistake," James said at last. "No," Charlotte replied, voice firmer. "I am making a choice." Daniel did not step forward. He did not play hero. He stood close, enough to say, "I'm here if you need me," without words. James turned and walked away without saying her name. The sound of his heels faded, and then the only noise left was Luna's small breath and the tiny scratch of a crayon rolling on the blanket. Charlotte's hands were shaking. Daniel knelt to her level and rested a hand on her arm. "Are you okay?" She nodded, but a tear slid down anyway. "Yes," she whispered. "I did not hide. Sometimes valiant looks like a sword. That day it looked like a daughter, not whispering. The quiet after a storm is sometimes the heaviest part. The days that followed were too still. No picnic, no coffee, no knock on the door." Charlotte told herself that Daniel was busy. She told herself that Luna had school things. She told herself that stepping back is what good people do when the world turned sharp, but it felt like a missing tooth she could not stop touching with her tongue. Across town, Daniel stared at Charlotte's name on his phone every night and did not press it. He replayed the words of a powerful man who was also a father. He told himself that he could not be a war inside someone else's family. He thought he was protecting her by staying away. On the third day, Luna sat on the floor with her teddy bear and asked, "Did you make her sad?" Daniel closed his eyes. "I hope not." Luna's lip trembled. "I miss her." "Me too," he said. The next week, Charlotte went back to the playground by herself. She brought a cupcake again, like a ritual she could control. She stared at the icing and tried not to feel foolish. The air was cool. The sky was pale. Footsteps came, careful and slow, like someone walking on a frozen pond. "Hey," Daniel said. She did not look up at once. When she did, he was there. Hair messy from the wind, eyes tired and kind. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said. "I wasn't sure I should," he admitted. He lowered himself to one knee, to be eye level. "I thought distance would keep you safe," he said. "But today is the day you were born. Charlotte and I could not stay away." The cupcake trembled in its paper cup. He placed a hand over hers. "You matter to me," he said. "Not because of your name, not because of what you can do. You matter because when I am near you, I remember who I want to be." He leaned and kissed her forehead. A small shape rushed toward them. "Charlotte," Luna squealed. She pressed herself against both of them, like she could glue them back together with her arms. Under a sky the color of new hope, the three of them stayed like that for a long moment, quiet and whole. The second turning point came when a car with dark windows stopped across the street from the central garden. Inside sat James Blake, looking out through the tint as if peering into a life he had left on a shelf. He expected to see his daughter alone and neat and silent. He saw something else. He saw her laugh. It was not a polite smile for cameras. It was a laugh that made her eyes fold and her shoulders relax. She leaned into a man in a cheap shirt like it was the most natural thing in the world. A little girl danced in the grass nearby, hair wild, feet dirty, free. James felt something old in his chest crack. "Pull over," he told the driver. He stepped onto the path and walked with a careful kind of courage. Charlotte saw him first. She did not stiffen this time. She sat up taller. Daniel stood because he was a man who stood when another man came close to his family. Luna stopped spinning and watched with open curiosity. James looked at Charlotte. "Are you happy?" he asked. Silence spread like water. "Yes," she said for the first time since Mom. James nodded once and turned to Daniel. "Walk with me." They moved down the path, two men with different hands and the same afraid heart. "I misjudged you," James said finally. "At first I saw a man with calloused hands and a cheap watch and a little girl who would bring chaos to quiet rooms. But then I saw my daughter with light back in her face." He exhaled like he had been holding his breath for 2 years. "I did not lose her in the crash. I lost her after, when I buried myself in work and left her alone with the echo." Daniel did not gloat. He did not flinch. "Grief makes us strange," he said. James nodded. "I have an outreach division at my company, a piece I plan to sell. It supports small shops and family businesses. I want you to run it. Not as charity, as trust." Daniel blinked. "Sir, this is not a price tag for my daughter's joy," James said. "This is because you gave her something I could not find. You gave her a chance to breathe. He held out a hand. Daniel took it. They walked back, two men a little less afraid than before. The third turning point was not a fight or a big show. It was slow and careful and tender. It was a family making new shapes. James came to the park the next Sunday without a tie. He watched Luna teach Charlotte to blow bubbles one-handed so the wand did not spill. He watched Daniel give Charlotte a screwdriver and ask her to help fix the sticky stroller wheel, not because she needed power, but because she deserved it. He watched Charlotte show Luna how to mix paint so that clouds looked fluffy and close. He noticed how Daniel looked at Charlotte when she spoke, the way people look when they stand near a fire that keeps them warm. He noticed that his daughter's eyes were not tired anymore. He noticed that when he spoke to her, she met him with both calm and steel. One evening, he came to her small apartment. He stood in the door with a paper bag. "I brought the lemon cookies you liked when you were little," he said. He did not know how to begin, so he began with something that had sugar. They sat at her small table. It felt like two people learning how to hold a single plate without breaking it. "I am sorry," he said finally. His voice was the voice she remembered from the old kitchen, softer than boardrooms. "I did not know how to grieve and be a father at the same time." He looked older, smaller. "I did not blame you because you lived," he said. "I blamed myself because I made your mother drive that day, and I could not bear the truth, so I held my breath for years." Charlotte did not speak at once. She reached across the table and put her hand over his, just for a moment. "We are both still here," she said. They cried a little. They laughed awkwardly. They ate a cookie that was almost too sweet. It was a start. The climax came on a day that began like any other, and that is how storms often arrive. It was a festival day in the park. There were paper lanterns, food trucks, a puppet show, and a little stage where a local band played songs that made children jump. Charlotte had helped set up a booth for a charity that gave art kits to kids in hospitals. Daniel and Luna helped carry boxes of markers and ribbons. James came in a clean white shirt with his sleeves rolled up, willing to work, unsure how. The air smelled like popcorn and grass. A small generator chugged near the food tents, and a cable ran from it across the path to a vendor. It should have been taped down. It was not. A sudden shout went up near the puppet booth. A boy had tripped, caught the cable, and pulled it halfway loose from the generator. The heavy machine sputtered, the cable sparked, and flames licked up. The dry paper banner tied to the tent post. People panicked. Someone yelled, "Fire!" The flame grabbed the edge of a cloth table cover and started to run. There was not much time. Daniel moved fast, grabbing a water cooler and dumping it on the fire's base. It hissed, but the cloth kept burning. He batted it with his jacket, but the wind pushed the flame toward a second table. "Luna!" he shouted, back with Charlotte. Luna froze, eyes wide. Charlotte wheeled forward, put herself between Luna and the flame, and called, "I'm here. Come to me." Luna ran to her and clung to her side. James pulled a fire extinguisher from a nearby stand, one of the emergency kits he paid to install in parks across the city years ago, and tossed it to Daniel. Daniel yanked the pin, aimed the nozzle low, and squeezed. White foam covered the fire's mouth and smothered it. The flame coughed and died. People clapped, shaky and relieved. The band stopped. A voice over the small speaker thanked the guy with the dusty jacket. Daniel put the extinguisher down and turned to Charlotte and Luna. "You okay?" "We're okay," Charlotte said, but her voice shook. Luna nodded, face pressed into Charlotte's side. James stood there, breath, heavy eyes wet. He looked at Daniel. He looked at Charlotte. He saw how they formed a triangle around a child with fear in her hands. He stepped forward and, without asking, put his hand on Luna's back and his other hand on his daughter's shoulder. The three adults stood like a shelter around the little girl. In that simple shape, a new family showed itself to the world, and to themselves. After the fire, the music started again, softer at first, then brighter. People went back to laughing. The smell of roasted corn drifted through the air. Charlotte manned the art booth with Luna, who was now the very serious keeper of stickers. Daniel fixed the vendor's cable, using his own tape from his truck, explaining how and why. James carried boxers and asked where to stack them. When the sun began to lower, the sky turned gold. Daniel helped Charlotte onto the grass near the small stage and sat beside her. Luna curled up in her lap and fell asleep with a marker still in her hand, a blue line on her fingers like a river. "You were brave," Daniel said. "I was scared," Charlotte admitted. "So was I. Brave and scared play together sometimes." She smiled. "Thank you for coming back." He nodded. "I should have never left. You wanted to protect me. I will always want that," he said. "But I will learn to do it without taking your voice." He looked at her then, really looked. "I love you," he said. He said it like a thing he had known and held until the right time. Charlotte felt something lift in her chest, like a flock of tiny birds. "I love you too," she said. It was not a grand speech. It did not need to be. Under a sky full of soft light, love was a quiet sentence that made the world make sense. James stood a little away and watched, not with hunger to control, but with gratitude that he could witness it. Days turned into weeks, and weeks became a season. James kept showing up. Sometimes he brought lemon cookies. Sometimes he brought nothing but time. He asked about Charlotte's art and listened without trying to fix it. He asked Daniel about the outreach program and listened without turning it into a chart. He took Luna to an old bookstore where the owner let her sit on a stool and ring the bell for fun. Daniel started the new role at Blake Tech's community division. He did not move into a fancy office. He kept the same old truck with the rattling tools. He visited small bakeries and family shops and fixed their old freezers for free because it was sometimes the fastest way to help a dream stay alive. He trained young people from the neighborhood to repair things. He hired a woman who had been turned away too many times because she used a cane. He made space for people who were not used to being invited. Charlotte painted again, not just trees and benches, but moments. She painted a picture of Daniel kneeling to tie Luna's shoe, with a bright morning light on his face. She painted her father sitting at a small table with a paper cup of coffee, his hand on his chest as if steadying a soft ache. She painted her own chair with flowers climbing up the spokes like vines, not to hide it but to honor it. She began teaching art once a week at the children's hospital, rolling into rooms with a box of colors and a gentle smile. "Art is a way to say hard things," she told the kids. "You don't have to be brave before you start. You can be brave after." One late afternoon, under the same trees that once held only silence, friends gathered for a simple engagement party. There were picnic tables and string lights, plates of food made by neighbors, a cake with frosting that said, "Always." Luna wore a dress with tiny stars and carried a small bracelet made of beads. She climbed into Charlotte's lap and slipped the bracelet over her hand. "For my new mommy," she whispered. Charlotte's breath hitched. "I will wear it always," she said. She looked at Daniel, who stood in a clean shirt with a crooked tie he let Luna tie. She looked at her father, who stood with his sleeves rolled up and his eyes bright. He stepped forward, knelt beside his daughter, and hugged her. It was not grand, it was real. Later, Charlotte pulled a cloth from an easel and showed a painting. In the front was her wheelchair catching a stripe of sun. Behind it were two figures with hands on the handles together. In front of them, a little girl ran with her arms wide, laughing like the world belonged to her. Below it, in careful script, was a line: "Family is not built by blood. It is built by those who stay." The crowd went quiet in the good way. Daniel reached for her hand. James rested a steady hand on her shoulder. Luna leaned her head against her side. In that circle, a life that had once been broken now felt whole. Much later, when the lights were dim and the park had gone soft and sleepy, Charlotte sat alone for a moment and looked at the slide where children had played all day. She remembered another day, not so long ago, when she sat alone with a small cupcake and a heart full of old storms. She thought of her mother's laugh, of lemon cookies on a small plate, of a man with dusty hands who knelt so his eyes were level with hers and said, "You mattered to me," and a little girl who believed castles could be built with pancakes. She thought of her father's stiff shoulders relaxing and his voice becoming human again. She thought of a tiny bracelet made of bright beads that fit too loosely on her wrist and perfectly on her heart. She took a slow breath and smiled. "Happy birthday," she whispered to the girl she had been and to the woman she was now. Then she looked up at the stars that Luna always counted and thought about the title that once felt like a wound and now felt like a story that belonged to all of them. CEO's paralyzed daughter sat alone until a single dad said, "My daughter would love to play with you." It began with a small hello. It grew into a family, and if someone asked for the lesson, she would say it in simple words, so even a child could carry it home. Sometimes you are not saved by a grand rescue. Sometimes you are saved by a brave little voice, a steady hand, and a love that stays.